Hey everyone, I've been wanting to make this video for a while. I think Keria has been the best support in the world for quite some time now. He has had insanely consistent and clutch performances. For those of you that don't know, Keria is a professional support player on T1. He has been on T1 for many years now. He made World Finals. He's just been an excellent League of Legends and support player. And T1's identity this year is pretty much let bot lane solo carry games. So many games are decided by practically 10 minutes with Keria alongside Gumayusi in the bot lane. So I want to talk a little bit holistically about Keria, and then we can jump into some examples. So I believe what separates Keria from the rest of professional supports is his champ pool, his consistency, and his clutchness. So he understands the game. He is a very solid player, but he also knows when to turn on the heat and make those game-winning plays, which is very rare for supports to do this consistently. We can think of Hylissang as that coin flip player who either solo carries games and makes these plays or just ints and loses the game for his team. Keria manages to consistently make these game-winning plays and be successful. So I want to talk about his solo queue quickly. He's not dominating solo queue. He plays a lot of different champions. He fights a lot, and we don't know why he is playing solo queue. We don't know his approach for solo queue. Maybe he's using it to prop up his pro champion pool. Maybe he's using it to limit test. It's really hard to just speculate on something like this. We don't know his relationship with solo queue. Whereas solo queue for us is both practice and performance. We really want to streamline how we approach the game and streamline our improvement. And so this is going to be a tricky video to approach. I don't want to show him cooking, picking random support champions and inting in solo queue. I also don't necessarily want to show coordinated team play with T1 at the highest level, as this won't necessarily help your journey for solo queue for improvement. So what I think I will do is I will show early approach and structure to solo queue, try and read from my knowledge what he may be thinking about and why he is doing what he is. And then a little bit of skirmish and execution in pro play that could be helpful for your games as well. And so for this first solo queue game, he is Rakan, and the matchup is Rakan versus Draven Nautilus. And this game is a great example to show that just doing the right things consistently well is what makes you a great player. You don't necessarily have to do all of these flashy plays. And so from a coach and a challenger player's perspective, this is a really fun and cool game to have a look at. So let's jump into it. So the first thing I want to talk about is the matchup. So Draven and Nautilus versus Rakan. Obviously Draven and Nautilus have a lot of kill threat, and we want to find a way to try to bridge the early game. And so what's going to happen is they're going to start in lane, which is going to be very useful in terms of getting control of the first wave. And then they can hit level 2 first, and then they can bounce a wave, and then eventually set up that freeze and just chill out. And I think something that's really cool to note is that he doesn't level up a point in any ability right now. And so this is matchup knowledge. This is knowing that you don't just want to default to taking W level 1 every game as Rakan. Sometimes it's very unlikely that you're going to be able to find a W forwards. For example, in this lane, if he Ws forwards, then he has no escape, he has no peel for his ADC, and they're just going to all in and probably come out ahead in the 2v2. And so he'll hold his skill points to see if he needs to use his E onto his Xayah, or maybe if he needs to level up a point in queue to heal her up. And so he starts in lane, and they don't damage the first wave too much. Now, the more that you damage the first wave, the further up the wave is going to push into the lane, and then the less you can potentially do with your level 2 spike. And he's pressuring from Fog. He still hasn't leveled up his skills. And he's just going to look to hit level 2 here. And he still hasn't leveled up anything. Hitting level 2, and now they're going to chill out. And so this is more game knowledge. So we have an Echo jungle who is going to be very weak early, and he wants to typically get a lot of camps under his belt. And we're versus the Lee Sin jungle, who wants to probably play towards his Draven Nautilus lane and have a lot of kill threat and look to skirmish. And so we get level 2 first, and then we don't try to push his wave all the way under tower. We just get the melees, and then we're just ready to be defensive, to mitigate, to minimize. There's no insane outplays that are going on here. This is just very solid League of Legends and understanding. And so eventually he's going to decide to level up E, and then how he uses it is pretty next level, to be honest. He's going to use it to bait out Nautilus's Q and then E away at the last second. So these like little optimizations can go a long way. It's not necessary for you to climb, but I thought it was cool to see. And so he puts a point into E, and eventually he's going to put a point into his Q a little bit later as well. Once again, most likely deciding that he is not going to look to aggressively W forwards, and he'd rather look for that Q sustain when they're a little bit poked out both of them. And so you can see the game plan all coming together, right? They got level 2 first. Their wave is fine. They're staying healthy. They're minimizing. They're allowing our bot lane to scale up, theirs to not accelerate, our jungler to farm up and not fall behind to Analysing ganking a volatile bot lane or anything like that. And then eventually Nautilus decides that he's had enough and he's going to try to all-in. And so the way that Keria deals with this all-in is just really textbook, cool, calm, collected, understanding exactly what his role is in this situation. And so he's going to E onto the Xayah for the first E to provide that Guardian, to provide that shield, and then he's going to stand in front of the Xayah so that he tanks the hook. And then he's going to have his E2 to jump away after the hook has been used. So if you use both E's just to maximize the shield output initially, and then he gets hooked, he's going to have to flash or he's going to die. And so this is just, it's great to watch. And I want you guys to put yourself in his shoes. This is a scary situation, right? A Draven Nautilus are trying to all in your ADC, but you need to be cool, calm, collected and figure out the best way to deal with the situation. And because Rakan has 2 E's, he can just stand here. The only play for Draven Nautilus in this situation is to try and kill the Xayah. And if you just block that hook and then E away afterwards, you're going to mitigate it very, very well. And then this is one of the trickiest parts of the game to navigate. And sometimes your job is just going to be to minimize in tough matchups. And so what happens is their mid lane Silas overextends, roams and dies, and then they collect their free kill happily. And then they're going to move back to lane. And they identify that Draven is potentially out of position. And so now the game's pace is accelerating quite a lot, but they're in a position to help. They're just doing the right things. Then he jumps in, finds a kill on the back end here. Really solid stuff. And so much has happened in the first 4.5 minutes. And it's not anything that none of you can do. It's just knowing what to do in this situation consistently and knowing what to do in every other situation that Lee can throw at you consistently. There are so many matchups to think about, so many roles to think about. And so I could show you hundreds of his solo queue games and show how he has a pretty good read of how it should play out, and he will be able to do it consistently in the early game. What's going to happen after this moment is he's just going to force a horribly ill-advised 2v2 all-in fight and practically throw the game for his entire team. And so let's have a look at that quickly before we move on. So Draven still has his sums. We talked about how important it is to minimize, prevent the enemy team from doing what they want to do. However, Keria is going to wrap around onto the Draven and force a fight. And not only is he going to mechanically mis-execute, he's going to miss his W. Even if this W was going to land, Draven can just flash it and all in on the Xayah anyway. And so this 2v2 fight is just doomed. And so he just kind of undoes all of the hard work that he did earlier on. So for the next game, Keria is playing Karma in a matchup of Israel Karma versus Caitlyn Lux. This is such a different situation to last game. So I just want to reiterate how impressive it is for him to be able to assess what needs to be done in each situation and also be able to actually execute on it. So whenever there's a heavy lane bullying lane like Caitlyn Lux or Caitlyn Morg or Israel Karma, there's going to be a lot of emphasis in controlling the bot lane, especially mid-bush, getting control, being in lane before your opponent so you can actually control the lane. And so he's going to bring his whole team down here, which is very important to make sure that he gets control of the lane. He's going to go sweeper to make sure that neither of these bushes end up having a ward. And he's not going to base. He's going to stay in lane afterwards to make sure that Caitlyn and Lux cannot enter the lane whatsoever. This is fantastic knowledge and strategy from Keria. And so if Israel Karma gets to start in lane and poke Caitlyn and Lux out before they even enter the lane, this is just really, really winning. And Caitlyn Lux need to find a way to win 2v2 or they're going to be exceptionally useless. And so he's going to pressure from Fog. He's going to look to poke them on entrance, like I was saying. And so he finds the window to poke out the Lux, and then he's going to go into Fog and be quite tricky to hit. And so he's going to be unpredictable initially, and here is where the strategy and the execution and the clutchness all kind of come together. He understands the volatility of this lane. He understands that if he can find control in this lane, it's going to be so, so useful for the 2v2. And so he's dancing in and out. He's been unpredictable with his movements, and then he uses his Ignite paired along with his Nimbus Cloak to get the move speed to dodge Lux's E and buy them enough space to control the lane. And so I forgot to mention this earlier, but his entire setup is indexed in towards the early game. He has Comet, he has Nimbus, he has Absolute, he has Scorch, he has Biscuits. These can all help in the early game, and he really wants to make sure that he can shut down the Caitlyn and the Lux. Last game on Rakan, his setup was heavily focused on early game as well. He was versus Draven Nautilus. He really wants to be able to survive that lane. And so he uses that to dodge the Lux E, and then he gets to posture aggressively, control the lane, and then contest for level 2. Whereas normally Caitlyn and Lux have so much wave control, so much shove, that it's almost impossible to get level 2 at the same time or before them. And so that's what he's looking to do. He's looking to spam autos onto the melees to try and get level 2 as quickly as possible. And then he has the confidence to be able to dodge the Lux Q aggressively while they're going to hit level 2. And so on paper, we can say that maybe the best play is to just be sitting back here and hit level 2 slightly behind and give up some semblance of control of the bushes, but he has that confidence and that execution and the anticipation of what Lux probably wants to look to do to be able to dodge that Q. And if he gets hit by that Q, he is just absolutely dead with the chain CC and one shot from Caitlyn and Lux. Okay, let's keep going. He dodges that. He gets to maintain control in a volatile lane. And that should be your goal here, to consistently shove and find windows to poke out this lane. And so we're going to see him find windows to auto and shove and maintain minion HP advantage, and then find windows from fog to poke as well. Really solid, really good understanding. And then we have poked out the Lux enough that maybe our jungler could look to dive. However, they just give over a free kill. It happens. That doesn't interrupt his game plan too much. He's going to look to continue to dominate 2v2. And his E usage isn't something that we've had too many opportunities to look at just yet, but it's really going to turn around soon here. And so he has very deliberate spell usages. His Qs have been very high percentage. He's landed his R Qs as Karma, which you always should be able to do. And then he's had a few other Qs that have splashed off of the wave and poked out someone. And so that's what he was looking for here. Unfortunately, he misses, but he has a good idea of how to make the most of his spells. Deliberate spell usage, very important concept. And he isn't using E randomly. He's using it to shield himself or to shield his Israel from when they're going to get poked by a Lux E. And also what he did, again, is he held his skill point and he assessed whether he would want to go 2 points in Q or a point in W. And if he thinks there is likely to be a 2v2 fight where W might be more handy for an all-in, or if it's more likely just going to be a poke war and they're stuck on the tower and we're trying to dominate and shove. And so he decides to put his level up point into Q for 2 points in Q, which I thought is intelligent. I don't think it's likely that there is going to be a window to use W, and then we can see his E usage again to prevent the poke from Lux. And then he is just shoving, poking, great fundamentals. We're going to speed it up a little bit here. And so they're relatively happy navigating the early lane already, and then he finds a window from base to roam towards mid. Doesn't matter if this works out or not. And so, in my opinion, his approach to the situation is there's no way that we can help Annie to get prior here, because all 3 enemy champions here are showing. The wave is practically already getting shoved out, and so Annie is just going to sit back here, catch the wave, base, TP back to lane, and there's not too much else to be done. Now what ends up happening is she just kind of gets caught for no real reason and forces a really bad gank, and then we can see Keria start to move back and then assess that it is just too late. So he sees something going on, and then he starts to move here, and then he's like, okay, no, this is done before I get there. And so fight assessment, accurate and precise assessment of what's going on. And this is a point that I was a little bit critical of CoreJJ when I reviewed his VODs. I thought he wasn't positioning optimally on the map during these roam timings. And so the fight's going to extend a little bit, and he's just going to call it a day and control around bot, and use this window while Lux was showing mid to actively zone off the Caitlyn. And then again, pressuring from fog in these bushes to be able to throw out those skill shots effectively while he has minion HP advantage. Looking for those high percentage Qs to splash off of the wave to shove and to poke. Once again, deliberate E usage, and this is just going to be pretty standard. So I'm going to speed this up a little bit. They're winning the lane. They're beating Kate Lux in a really tricky matchup through sheer fundamentals. And we can actively see him trying to generate and maintain minion HP advantage. There's a new wave coming along here. He wants to look for windows to auto this. He's going to queue it, he's going to auto it, and now they're just going to constantly have shove versus this lane bullying matchup. And this is just the last point. So this isn't necessary for climbing, but his body language, he has moved away from the bushes so that the enemy team feels a false sense of security to be able to position on this side of the lane to avoid Carmen is your poking from this side and just try to bait and draw the enemy ADC in, which is what happens. And then they get a couple kills, they get a good wave state, they crash, and then they can base, and they're just in a really good spot. Let's move on to some pro games from Keria, and I want to show how consistent and clutch this player really is. So this is game 1 of Worlds Finals in 2022, T1 vs DRX, and he is playing Renata. And so what's going to happen in this little situation is that he is going to posture to prevent Sivir from safely crashing this wave, because what Sivir wants to do is ensure this wave crashes and then find a base. And so if the wave doesn't crash and they hold a freeze, then Sivir could potentially lose some minions. So this is just a common kind of dance that bot lanes are going to do to fight for the wave state. And now what Keria is going to do is he's going to use his E and his Q right after each other, so that it's hard for Sivir to spell shield the Q, which is the threatening part of this Renata combo. And so he throws out the E and then the Q, and it's very, very difficult to appropriately E in time. And so then he hits the Sivir, pulls her in, and then just starts sprinting her down. Puts an early W on himself as well, so that he gets that ramping attack speed and move speed over the duration of the W. It's very solid play. And now he knows that Sivir has no sum, so he's going to constantly just run forwards as fast as possible, and then eventually flash forwards and find that kill. Having the confidence, the foresight, the poise to see this kill from this earlier position is really, really impressive, and such a high stakes game. Because what you'd normally see is the Renata would just kind of posture, and then Sivir would push him under tower, and then the Renata would concede, and then maybe look to cancel Sivir's base somewhere in the lane. But seeing this kill angle is really, really impressive. Moving on to game 2 of the same series, and in this situation, T1 is strong siding bot and weak siding top, so their jungler is on bot side and the enemy's jungler is on top side. So on this turn in the game, they're going to look to get as much as they can get done possible on the bot side. And so typically what would happen is red team here would crash this wave and then look to dive the enemy bot lane if they stay under tower, or just zone them off of the waves completely. However, Keria has supreme confidence in the situation to be able to pressure as aggressively as possible, and knows that the Varus is chunked out. And so Keria is not satisfied with just shoving this wave in through lane and then going from there. He is going to see the angle to walk in between towers and then find this insane Q flash double stun after he has slowed the Heimer with his E. So he slows the Heimer with the E, he predicts the juke, Q flashes to hide the animation so that it travels faster, and then he gets Varus ulted as well, and he Zhonya's on the WQ from the Varus so that he doesn't die. This is just insanely impressive given the stakes, perfectly executed, finding another kill and accelerating his team. And these plays are not something that you would expect from these enchanters and these mages, right? Finding these kills, flashing forwards. But you can see the confidence, the precision, and the clutch factor coming through. We're going to jump forwards in this game a little bit, and we're going to see one of the most insane sequences that I have seen in Worlds. And so what they're going to do is they're going to be setting up for Dragon here. And so they have control, they're grouped up as a team. And then they see Viego over here. And then Keria sees the sequence to be able to lock down the Viego and trusts that they will be able to get something positive from this. They're either going to kill him or force his flash and his ult, push him out, and secure Dragon. All from just a split-second decision, noticing that Viego is potentially a little bit out of position. I guarantee you 99% of Luxes here would just try to, poke out the team or just flush Viego away a little bit, but not Q flash and commit to this. And so I'm just going to play this out. Finds the Q flash, the ignite, saves the Everfrost for after Viego either ults or flashes, because Keria knows that he is going to ult or flash over the terrain. So really good Everfrost on the back end there, and then Guma flashes over. Keria is still chasing, lands another Q. And so he landed both Qs, he landed an Everfrost, and he found this really impressive sequence to catch the enemy jungle out of position. And his team still has enough time to move down to contest this dragon and potentially 50-50 the dragon, or find some kills afterwards and then just really control the map. All from the call of Keria. Moving on to game 4 of the same series. And here they are Kalista Soraka versus Varus and Renata. And let's just have a look at what happened over here. But Keria is going to dodge the Renata flash Q, and then Varus is going to use all of his cooldowns as well, and this gives them an opening to look to achieve something. And obviously this is going to be a bot lane play, not just a Keria play, but again, it's really impressive to see his decision making. You can see what he's thinking. He knows they have no cooldowns on this window. He knows Nada has no flash. And so he's going to flash forwards and find what would have been a double Q if Varus didn't flash. And then they're going to find an all-in. And eventually find that 2v2 kill, get a bunch of cooldowns as well, in a matchup that you wouldn't necessarily expect 2v2 kills to happen. This whole series was an insane bot gap, and especially support gap. I think it is a bit of a tragedy that Keria didn't end up winning the title. Now we're going to move on to the time when Keria famously brought out his Caitlyn support against KDF in 2023 this year. I just want you guys to quickly note that every single champion we have looked at on Keria so far has been a different champion. And so his understanding of champion identity and matchups is just through the roof. And so let's just explain why this pick might be effective. I have made a video on this, why the bot lane meta is so weird. You can check that out if you want. But we can really see what Keria wants to do with this pick. He wants to trade on his hob windows so that he can get a lot of damage out quickly. He wants to abuse his range advantage. He wants to use barrier as a tool to help him poke out the enemy team while staying healthy. And he's also going to build the wave to build as big of a wave as possible and then dive on that wave. So let's just jump into it and see what happens. And so you can see that they are not damaging the wave unnecessarily. They're even trying to zone the enemy bot lane off of EXP, which is very valuable if you can. And so now we see that Zeri has to decide to either sack EXP range or walk up for EXP and get poked out. And then Keria picks his moment to trade with Hob and then use barrier so that he stays healthy, and then uses Q to hit the ADC. And you can see the deliberate effort for Keria to be hitting the Zeri here instead of the Yuumi. He wants to poke up the enemy ADC. He wants to set up the enemy ADC to eventually get dove and miss a gigantic amount of minions. They're still completely leaving the minions alone and zoning EXP. And he is finding those windows to Q onto the Zeri. His Hail of Blades is back up, so he's going to use that to get a bunch of damage out. Unfortunately, he couldn't find it on the Zeri that time. We're just going to move forward a little bit here. Same song and dance for a little bit. And so they're stacking and stacking, and they're pushing so slowly that they even get somewhat of a fourth wave crash, which is almost unheard of in the bot lane. And so they're going to crash that giant wave, and this is just going to be a team strategy. They didn't bring Sejuani down. I think that was what KDF expected, and that's why Maokai was leaning towards bot to cover that dive. And then Sejuani surprisingly goes to gank top instead, and meanwhile the 2v2 bot, they're crashing that giant wave, and then they're just sieging and poking with that huge wave. And then they're going to get a couple of plates. So they got 1.5 plates at 3.5 minutes. And then it's just going to go back to the same thing. Stack as big of a wave as possible, deny minion last hits in EXP, and if Sejuani is on their side of the map, they can look to dive. And so then Keria is also going to be, once again, using his range advantage and trading on his Hail of Blades, trying to poke them out as much as possible. And this is very, very important when you are strong side, that you look for these volatile trades. Because if you're chunked and the enemy's chunked, it's way better for you if you're strong side, so that you can look to effectively dive them or gank them. So great understanding from them there. And then here, this dive is just going to be really, really simple because of how T1 played in the bot lane. And now the Zeri is practically out of the game. She has missed so many minion waves, and they are down 2 plates already. It's going to be 3 soon by the 5-minute mark. Now, having such a deep understanding of this lane's identity, I am relatively confident in saying that Keria probably has not played hundreds or thousands of Caitlyn support games. And so finding this niche and understanding how they can generate a consistent lead is really, really impressive. These off-meta strats, they're fun to watch as they're new, and they can also completely throw opponents off guard. Especially with pro metas tending to be very stale, players can get used to specific matchups and styles. So it's a huge weapon to have in your arsenal to be able to pull out these off-meta strategies effectively. It's similar to G2's current success with weird mid-picks like the Sejuanis and the Kleds. Backed up with team coordination, it's incredibly hard to prepare for and adapt to in the moment. So Keria's champ pool makes his team that much scarier. Let's go to game 1 of this series, and I'm going to breeze past the early game pretty quickly. He is playing a new champ. He again has that hob and barrier for those short, concise trades. they're going to do a similar thing. He's going to trade on his hop window, use his barrier to help sustain himself, poke the enemy out, and then look to zone EXP, build a wave. This is more of an impressive team coordination. What ends up happening with mid shoving and jungle pathing towards them this time and executing a gank, I do think it is worth just quickly showing because it is such a consistent threat that Keria is providing with this champ. And so they end up looking to 4-man dive. The tier 1 bot lane has been able to chunk them out a little bit for some potions. And they end up getting a couple kills there, and Lucian is missing a gigantic wave. So we know that Keria has exceptional understanding of what to do on his champ in the early game in any given matchup. I just want to show a couple moments of brilliance as well. And so he's going to throw a cross-map ult soon over here. It's important to note that he dips out into fog before he throws out the ult so that enemies cannot see. And then this is just, it's hard to be able to fully appreciate this ult without understanding his thought process. But cross-map Ashe ults are pretty iconic. Everyone knows what an Ashe ult does, and being able to hit them is just a whole nother deal. You need to read the enemy's body language. You need to kind of assess the likelihood that they're going to move forwards or backwards with regards to the matchup, with regards to your teammates' positioning or to the minions. Maybe they want to contest the last hit. Maybe you get your teammate to push them in a certain direction. There's just so much talent and coordination that needs to go into hitting an ult like this. Fiora ends up dying. So obviously Fiora could have used her riposte here. Maybe that would have opened up Kennen to get a big chunk regardless. We're going to move a little bit forwards here. They're going to throw out, Kiria's going to throw out another ult very soon. Pretty much as soon as his ult comes back off of cooldown, he is going to look for a pick onto the Victor. And so he's going to make sure to throw it from fog. He's sitting in fog, and then he just finds a window to hit the Victor. And so Keria has played such a huge part in terms of carrying this game and blowing this game up. The bot lane dives and 2v2 winning, ulting top, now moving towards mid and ulting mid and setting up another kill. The last pro game example we're going to look at is when he played Jhin versus Hanwha Life earlier this year in 2023 as well. And so of course I had to show another unique pick from him just to show his champion Ocean. Even though he has these consistent early games generating these leads, he understands his role throughout the game. And so we're going to see a team fight here, and he executes it so cleanly. And so the enemy team is going to be heading Baron, and then what he's going to do initially is he is going to ult from range and try to soften up the enemy team. And you can see that he is not looking to just ult Cassante because that wouldn't do as much damage as ulting the other members because he is just too tanky. And so he finds windows to ult onto the Maokai, the enemy jungle. He is targeting the enemy jungle here so that they cannot get the smite onto the Baron. And so he gets the pick onto the Maokai, and then he finds a W from range. So I just want to show you guys this W again. It's nothing too special, but it's well timed, and he makes sure that his W is going to hit. And so it hits the Cassante on the back end there. Once both enemies were kind of lined up together, so it's a very high chance of a W hitting here, especially when the Cassante is, self-stunning himself with casting an ability, and then he is running forwards. And then he finds a window to flash Q into the auto attack, the fourth shot. He flash Qs and then auto attack so that his auto attack would follow regardless of the enemy exiting, and to get that execute damage. So it does as much as possible. And so he finds this window to kill the Rakan, and then the Q bounce lands onto the other enemies and then sets up his W to land that as well. And so he's just played this sequence so perfectly on a champion that is not typically a support champ. And you can tell this player is exceptional at the game in terms of game knowledge. If anyone has watched Keria's streams, you should know that he plays sometimes jungle, like Lee Sin. He plays a lot of ADC as well. Extremely well-rounded player. In terms of what we can take away from this video, I think we can draw inspiration from being a student of the game. Even pros have to adapt to new metas, new champions, new strategies, and learn. And I find it inspirational to see what a player is capable of by fully immersing themselves and committing to a craft. We have to remember that he is on the best team in the world. He is playing consistently on the Korean server, the highest quality practice in the world. He spends his entire day thinking and playing and talking about League. Not to take anything away from his performance, his skill, but environment definitely plays a part into our journey. And who knows, maybe if you keep working, keep improving, keep being inquisitive and curious, you may reach heights that you never thought were possible for yourself. Next up for my South Island trip, I moved to Queenstown, which is where I was going to be staying for a week. This is a very popular tourist destination, especially during the summer season. And the place that I was staying at was beautiful. This was right on the edge of a mountain range, and this is literally outside the door of my Airbnb, these views that we're getting here. So what I would do is I would sit on the swings, which is where this photo was taken from, overlooking the mountains and just reflecting, enjoying the scenery, writing in my diary. Really fond memories from this. And then the first walk I did in Queenstown was around Moke Lake, and this was a gloomy day. I'm not complaining. I can enjoy this weather just as much as the sunny days. It was just around a lake with some mountains in the background, and it was a very isolated walk, which was refreshing because a lot of the other walks that I had been going on had a lot of other tourists there. So it was relaxing, it was a pretty easy walk, and my legs were thankful for me to do a bit of an easier walk as well. And pretty good scenery alongside that. And then this was the White Creek track, and this was an unspecified length, so this was quite a dodgy walk. I don't think you're supposed to do it in a day or by yourself. I had to rely on orange markings and steep drops right next to the track throughout the forest, and it was very easy to get lost, but it was all worth it in the end. So this was the creek over here, and then eventually I walked up to the top. You can see how high I got up here with the snowy mountains in the corner there. And so I turned around after the trail went across this river here with no simple way to cross. And so this was a little bit dodgy. It made me consider informing someone of my hikes. There was an element of danger which made it more fun and memorable though. And this was also a hike where I think I saw the first time ever in my life seeing an armed civilian. There was a hunter with a rifle that passed by. So there was no specified path. I had to navigate between markings on trees, and I think I ended up hiking for around 16 kilometers in the end. So quite a unique hiking experience in the end, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed. Big thank you to all of my patrons over here. I really couldn't do this without you. The links for coaching, for Patreon, for my School of Support Discord server, for socials, they're all going to be linked in the description below. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. I am streaming 5 days a week now at twitch.tv/cupcakeoce. Come say hi, I would love to see you there.